All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Express Outdoors State of Waterfowl series. We've been coming to you via Zoom. We're able to get together and have a few more meetings, and we kind of talked to you before the season, during the season, and now it's February the 2nd today, and I would assume by now most everyone has wrapped up their duck seasons. I'm sure there's still some diehard goose hunters out there, but we've got a really cool guest tonight, and we'll reveal him here in a few minutes. And we ought to have some great conversation tonight and just talk about, again, what's the state of waterfowl, especially in the Mississippi Flyway. So to get things cranked off, being we're post-waterfowl season, I just wanted to do a little maybe quick wrap-up of how everybody's hunting season was. And we got the usual crew again here tonight. We got Jim Ronquest over in Stuttgart with RMTV. Jim, glad you're with us again tonight.
Man, thanks for having me, as always.
And we also got Cason Short. He's with Bill Byers Hunter Club. And I don't know, are you at the camp tonight or are you back in Memphis?
I'm in Memphis tonight.
All right, good deal. Well, glad everybody was here. I guess let me go ahead and get started off for Gros Savant down in Southwest Louisiana. I guess, again, the best way to put it is I think we had a failing grade as far as waterfowl seasons go. Of course, we were in the middle of a hurricane-ravaged area, and we knew there were going to be some issues with food availability, but some people, as usual, there were some hot spots, but as a whole, I think it was another disappointing season for most hunters in our area. And we actually, I guess what disappointed me the most at Gros Savant is we left our entire second crop for the ducks and had a little over 1,000 acres, and they never even showed up to use it. We had plenty of snow geese ate it out, and probably more ducks there today with the season being closed than there was actually during the season. So kind of an interesting fact that the food was there, but they didn't show up. So, Cason, I guess, how was it up at Bill Byers this year?
It was a lot like I think everyone else, slower than normal. It wasn't a great year. Also wasn't a bad year either. It got stale kind of right there at the end in January. But, we talked, I guess, right there at the start of the season or before, I mentioned that year to date at the midpoint, we were down number-wise. And I think Jimbo was a little surprised by that. I kind of had an eerie feeling about being low number of birds that early in the year. It looked like it kind of held true as the state goes. State was down all season long. So just kind of middle note there, but interesting that it held true that when we were down early, we stayed down the entire year. But all in all, fair year, no huge complaints for us.
Jim, any comments on all the areas you got to hunt this year?
Kind of like everybody else, for me, it was up and down all over the board. We started off really strong, went on road trips, stayed pretty strong, even here at home until right at about Christmas or New Year's when we got that big 4-inch rain. Not every day was a zinger, but doing well. And that 4-inch rain actually hurt more than helped. It did put some water on the landscape, but it didn't put enough for very long in the river bottoms. That kind of come up and fell out, and it just kind of goofed things up, combined with the slow migration, or the widespread distribution of the migration this year. But that being said, had some good hunts, had some bad ones. But, like Cason said, I've had worse. And I certainly have better. I know I get to help out at one of our legacy properties here, the Greenbrier Club, and up until that rain, they figured every day they was averaging over a 4 duck per man average, and that's typically all mallards. After that big rain, it went downhill and it got bad slow there for a couple weeks, and then it kind of climbed back and then fell back again. But they still finished the year with a 3.4, 3.5 per man average, 90% mallard. So when you look at that on paper, I'm saying there's a lot of people around the country would love to do that good. And we're walking around going, man, it was rough. But the big picture, it really wasn't.
That similar to us at Gros Savant, we had a pretty strong first split. we were operating on a smaller scale due to our lodge being damaged from the 2 hurricanes. So had we been hunting to full capacity, I think our numbers would have been way off. But being we were only hunting a couple of blinds a day, those guys were able to utilize the whole property. So we, numbers-wise per hunter, we did very well this year. It's just kind of misleading, only hunting 2 or 3 blinds a day.
And they were somewhat the same way. Due to COVID, they changed up the way that, instead of running 4 groups a day, they ran 3 groups a day. And each member could only bring, they backed off the number of people. So if you look at their total number, they're down, but their birds per man stayed, pretty much on track with everything else. So, and a lot of other folks around this area will kind of mimic that. Some of the other commercial people started good, got bad, came back. Some folks had a tough year the whole year, but you're going to have that about any duck season, I think. You're going to have some folks getting them every day and some folks not. So it's been a while since we had one of them years where everybody got them.
Yeah, and we started off strong and then fell off towards the end there. It got really slow, similar to what Cason said, which kind of fits into some of those theories where I think we get those early migrators that come in regardless and we kill them. And then this year we had no weather to back up any new fronts, coming down. So we just kind of fell off. And then the last weekend, as usual, got good again, which is probably our birds headed back north, going, making their track back. So,
yeah, they've been coming from you for the last few weeks. Cason and I hunted together a few days, and we stay in contact a lot. It's funny. We start seeing them shovelers start showing up, and then there'd be a few blue wings around, and guys are seeing, and pintails, especially here when pintails start showing up in January. Man, pintails are just getting here, man. It's just now getting here. Yeah, they're coming from Louisiana is where they're coming from. They ain't coming from above us.
We shot blue-winged teal all season this year, if that tells you anything. So, yeah, pretty beautiful drakes this time of the year. It's really cool to get them when they're full plumage. So
yes, sir. They're pretty right now.
Yeah. So, talking to some other people here, I had a phone call with Bill Lowen the other day from one of the Express Boat Pros on the Elite Series, and he's a big avid duck hunter in the Indiana area. And he was telling us how tough it was up there for him this year. So, it sounds like a lot of the area in the flyway, there was a lot of disappointment there. So, which kind of leads into some of our conversation tonight with our guests. We'll go ahead and introduce a really cool guy with us tonight. If you enjoy looking at waterfowl and outdoor photography, and you've probably seen some of his photographs and ads all over the country in magazines, and this guy is really an avid duck hunter and passionate outdoorsman, and I've heard a lot about him, and I'm really excited to at least to get him meeting virtually tonight, and hopefully we can get together in a duck blind or in a boat fishing one day. But our guest tonight is Mr. Lee Kjos from Minnesota, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Looking forward to it.
So part of the State of Waterfowl series, we're trying to talk to as many people as we can in the flyway, and it's going to be interesting tonight to get a kind of a perspective from you up in Minnesota. In addition, from what I understand, you were a big hunter on the north side of the border also.
Yeah, I'm a northern boy. Yep.
So did you get to, with all the COVID things going on, did you get to hunt like you wanted to this year?
Oh, God, no, not even close. No. I mean, obviously with Canada being shut down, that took Canada away, and I've hunted ducks in Canada. I've probably made 100 or so trips up there in the fall since 1970, 74 was probably the first year my dad brought me up there. And then because of no Saskatchewan or no Canada, a lot of people applied for South Dakota, and I normally draw a South Dakota permit. Well, I didn't draw that either. And then due to like crazy weather conditions, North Dakota was a bust for most of the early parts. So it was really tough. I mean, maybe with the exception of like local wood ducks and stuff like that. But I mean, there was the normal hunting that I've done my whole life, I didn't get to do. No. But No complaints. I still got to go duck hunting, and I still love it. But no, not even close to normal.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to reiterate what he said. A lot of us forget we still had the opportunity to go duck hunting, and we still love it. I did something the other day on an IG thing. I never felt like I had to grind a day out. I never felt it was a grind, even though we had some long days on 2 sets a day. I never felt it was a grind. On the good days, we never ground them up. And at the end of the season, I still wanted to keep going. So
Right.
Just the fact that we still have the opportunity to go duck hunting is worth a lot. It could be worse.
No.
Granted, we all want them great seasons where we're tired of shooting them, but just getting to go is worth something.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%. So I guess, Lee, part of this State of Waterfowl series was all resurrected to just start discussing and bring to the attention of all the waterfowlers is there's obviously some kind of change going on in the flyway. And of course, everybody's got an opinion and there's nothing wrong with that because everybody, that's what they're entitled to. What we're trying to do through State of Waterfowl is be as scientific based as we can, present some information out there for the waterfowl community to formulate their own opinions of what's going on. And, even myself is a prime example down here in the southwest corner of Louisiana. I know a little bit about what Jim and Cason are doing in Arkansas because of their proximity to me, but I am clueless as to what happens with the waterfowl world in Minnesota. And so this has been a really cool platform to get all this information out to everyone in the listening audience to kind of just hear what's going on. And whether it's through some of the PhD speakers we've had, the telemetry work that's going on, there is a lot of really cool information that's taking place right now in the waterfowl world. And I know this is a loaded question, and this is probably where we kickstart where we're going to go tonight, but you're obviously you're a very opinionated guy, and you've got your theories on what's happening in your part of the country, and theories and opinions are what creates ideas and identifies problems that, even though tonight we may not discuss any scientific information, we can throw ideas out that maybe are worth studying or looking at patterns and getting the attention of some grad students. So what do you see happening in Minnesota and Canada in your part of the country? Are you seeing the decline in waterfowl, or let's just throw that out there and get started?
Yeah, well, first of all, you touched on this, so I'll get this out in the open. I'm not a biologist, right? I don't have any I have some. We can talk about some facts that I've found out, numbers and things like that. But I come at this from first of all, I agree what Jimbo just said about, hey, that we're going to get into things that I would consider negative in the sport. And I really don't want people to think it's like a negative thing, right? Because I was still duck hunting this year, and I love duck hunting just like I did when I was a little kid. So let's start with that, right? But if you want to get into things that I would think could be problematic, or even things that I personally feel are problematic, I'm a Northern Prairie DIY guy at heart, right? And the change, so instead of like biology or science, what I can come at this from a perspective of a waterfowl hunter and a photographer. I don't always carry a gun, but I do love killing them. Don't get me wrong. But I love watching them. I love being in them. I love taking pictures of them. I love everything about them. And the changes that I've seen personally since the early 70s are, they're mega, right? So if you'd asked me, but there's been other decades or other periods that have had like major changes before. Like you could go back to the 70s or the late 70s in the 80s, and you could start getting into, I still claim the largest effect that anything ever had on duck hunting was no-till farming in the North. once you took away fall plowing, and you had no, especially on greenheads. Once you took away plowing, and you left food out there, no-till farming, they just drill it in the spring, right? Mm-hmm. As long as greenheads have water, and they don't even need much water, they can live on ice. I mean, they just don't leave, right? So I think that had a factor. And then years later, you'd get into, I'd say back in the day in Saskatchewan, first of all, there was very, very, very few people that hunted it, non-residents, aliens, they call them. So we hunted water. It's all we hunted ducks on was water. And the layout blind and the spinner made outfitting, not even just outfitting and freelancing both, but it made it, I'd say, easier, more accessible for people to do. And then eventually it grew and grew to the point where pressure on their food in the field, pressure on their food morning and evening every day became a huge factor in early migration, greenheads becoming nocturnal. And that to me, I would say is the biggest change. I think it was even in the 90s, the total duck harvest in Saskatchewan, residents and non-residents both, was around 240,000 ducks, and most of those are going to be greenheads, right? Well, the last number I looked at was almost 1 million. I think it was 975,000. Okay, so you're talking about roughly 700,000 more ducks being shot, and you guys all know what early season duck hunting on the fields looks like up there, right? You're talking a lot of young of the year and hens, and it's had a huge effect on it. Huge. What do you guys see? What do you guys think about that?
Jim, Cason, anybody got a comment?
Man, Lee.
Yep.
Not to try to argue with you. I'd be curious about where your numbers come from. John Devney and I, with VP at Delta Waterfowl, him and I had this same discussion last summer. We went after harvest records in Saskatchewan pretty heavily, and his numbers that he was coming up with kind of showed that a little differently. The harvest rate. The mid 70s was higher in Canada than it has been the past couple. It's hard to imagine that. I don't know what, but he had some stuff from the CWS, Canadian Wildlife Service, and stuff that seemed pretty telling. That being said, there is certainly more U.S. people going to Canada on years that you can get into Canada. There's more guys outfitting, and it'd be interesting to come up with some really solid numbers, because it would seem that,
I agree.
To your point, with the spinners, man, the first time I went up there with a spinner, you could get on a hilltop in a barley field or wheat field, put a spinner out, sit down in a lawn chair and shoot ducks for a big man's ass. It didn't matter. And you would think that would add in to harvest records, hence to your numbers kind of make sense. Where Devney was like, no, that's really not, the harvest numbers aren't as big as you think, because there's very few Canadian people hunting anymore. It's just U.S. folks going up there to hunt. So I don't know the answer there, and certainly not trying to stir nothing up.
No,
it's just interesting. And I'll throw this to it. This past year, with Canada not letting non-residents in to hunt, there's a lot of folks around here was like, man, we're gonna have a bunch more ducks this year because they're not shooting them in Canada. That didn't happen. I mean, you look at our midwinter survey, we had the lowest midwinter mallard count ever. since they've been doing the midwinter in Arkansas. Now it did pick up another 150, 200,000, but still it was
still that's low.
Difficult. Yeah. So that being said, we didn't get that big influx of birds that supposedly didn't get shot in Canada because of U.S. residents. So I would be curious on how that all is going to play out in the future. I don't know. Boy, none of us got the answers, right? We all just searching for it. But I just wonder what would happen if we had another. Everything came together like it did in '99 with a huge bee pop, 2 years of huge hatches. I wonder if that wouldn't fix a whole lot of what we're worrying about right now.
Well, I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's always going to come down to habitat and nesting conditions on the prairie when you look at major fall flights. And I mean, Canada doesn't have any program they don't have any grass program. They still drain wetlands. I mean, there's nowhere near the amount of water up there that there was when I was a kid in the 70s up there. I mean, not even close.
I can't imagine the difference. I was up there year before last hunting with a buddy of mine, and there's a guy with a big Kelly Diamond Harrow, what's the biggest one they make? Cason, it's like 60 foot, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
60. A big 4-wheel drive John Deere, and he was wading off in there to one side of them duels were getting a little bit wet, and all he was trying to do was he's trying to take it further and further to dry it up. I don't necessarily begrudge them trying to make a living.
No.
For a living.
No, you can't.
At the same time, I would like to see them find some kind of balance there. I know they got that Alice program in Canada. It's kind of like our CRP and WRP, but it's way, way, way behind. It's just barely that far out of the ground. If there's a way we could get those people to cooperate with us better, and they do cooperate with us some, being the Canadian Wildlife Service, there's just a lot more we could do habitat-wise. Along with that, wintering habitat here, this is opening another can of worms, but there's a whole lot more we could do for them right here at home.
Well, it's interesting. We're kind of getting on the ag subject there, and we're talking about Canada mainly, but another area we've lost a ton of habitat. We've lost 5 million acres of CRP in the Dakotas alone in the last 20 years. So that's, we still have some programs there, but we're giving up a lot of nesting ground there too. And to tie ag into that even more, Lee, I think to your point about no-till farming, that's been one of the biggest changes, period. You add to that increase of food in the northern states, Jimbo in our part of the world, and Doug, you too, the loss of rice acreage in total in Louisiana, not to mention we're planting crops earlier, we're harvesting them earlier. What grain we do leave is germinating, but we're leaving a lot less too. The efficiency of modern combines, we used to leave well over 100 pounds an acre of rice. Now we're down to somewhere around 40 pounds, which is the give up threshold for ducks. And that's in August, not in November. So by the time they get here, they don't have much left to eat. So the table has completely switched. You've got grain on the ground in the north because of no-till, and you've got less grain in our part of the world. And we've got a nesting problem because we're losing grassland all over the nesting ground. So we've got a lot of issues going on.
Right.
So Cason and or Lee, for the person that's out there listening and he threw out the term no-till farming, why would that have an impact on ducks? Can you kind of maybe explain what's going on there with no-till?
Well, if let's see, I'll go back to what I saw, right? Okay, so when I was a kid, cutting my teeth duck hunting with Dad on the prairie, it usually happened around Halloween when all your farming was done and they turned that soil over. And they turned it over black, and they not only turned it over black, then they dragged it and they made it flat. And there was no food. So those greenheads got to go, right? And that's what they do. Then chisel plowed corn started to become a thing that held topsoil, right? Because it was so rough. Chisel plowed fields, you guys know what they're like. They're hard to walk in. But the greenheads started to use those. And especially around, you could take Minnesota, you could go at western Minnesota, you could go to Talcott or Lac qui Parle, around those big refuges where those big bodies of water, greenheads would relate to that big water late in the year, and they would started to hit chisel plowed. But I'm telling you, man, once no-till farming happened, and they left those fields like they were after they were picked, combined. And by the way, combining in the late 70s or the 80s is a lot different than the way combining is now. Fields were way dirtier than they are now, and ducks, they loved it. And cold, you guys know, cold doesn't bother a greenhead. We have greenheads all over Minnesota right now. It's not the cold that does it. If they got any kind of water at all in food and no pressure, they're not going anywhere. That's what I think happens.
So prior to no-till, we were basically covering up the food source, I guess, burying what available seed was on the ground. And now with no-till, we're leaving all of that exposed for the ducks to feed. Is that kind of the idea?
Yep. And back when it was newer, like I said, there was way more waste grain in a field than there is now. Farming practices, things are more efficient than they were. But still, no-till farming changed duck hunting, especially greenheads in the north. They didn't move. I remember it was Phil Robertson when I was doing some work for those guys back in the day before the Duck Dynasty thing. And I was talking to Phil about greenheads, and I'm like, when's the last time you remember like greenheads really being like you were in them, like mid-50 stuff. I can't remember the exact date he said, but he even told me, he's like, it's no-till farming. And I'm like, it's absolutely what it is. But that, that's only one thing. When you start adding, you just like Cason, you talked about loss of CRP. There's 13.5 million acres of CRP came out post Bush's W's second term. Okay. Well, that's 13.5 million acres. And when you take grassland across the prairie pothole region and then factor in loss of water, loss of habitat, you factor in all these things we talk about, it adds up to what I would consider a problem, right? Now, and it's not to pick on like one thing, because I don't think that's right to pick on one thing. All these little things add up to what you guys see in the South and what I see in the North is, what would you call it? Like altered behavior. But also, do I think there's less? Well, yeah, I do. I don't. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the biologists really say, but I don't see it. I mean, and I'm out there. You guys know I'm out there photographing, and those photographs, that a lot of that stuff that you guys saw in like Ducks Unlimited and those massive flocks of greenheads, I called them bastard flocks, and I would photograph them well into November. But this was before people were up there late in the fall like that. I mean, once they figured that out and they were pressured, then it's not like that anymore. I'm not saying you can't find it or you can't see it, but I saw it as commonplace. Mm-hmm. Common. Like I go out anytime in an area in Saskatchewan that I was used to, especially in the north around the bush country, and there could be within a 20-mile radius, there could be 5 bunches of birds that were 50 to 80,000. I mean, staggering numbers, right? They're not going anywhere.
That's cool.
But I don't see it anymore. Not like that. But
when was that time frame wise, Lee?
I would say, well, somebody mentioned 99, and I think 99 was the greatest year of greenheads I ever saw in my life. We used to call it millennium. I had a buddy that we chased them all over, and we called them millennium mallards. Oh my God, it didn't matter where we went. It was nuts, the amount of greenheads in the north. And was it Jimbo? Was it you that brought up 99?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the same year. I
saw the same thing.
I had one duck blind. That's still in the commercial guide business then. And we had one blind that year. Shoot, I go back and look at the calendar on occasion just to read the numbers, and it still shocks me today. We had one blind shoot over 2,000 mallard ducks in one duck season. That's crazy.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's out of one blind. That ain't just one whole place. That's one blind. I mean, shooting the hell out of them. Looking back, we overshot them. We shifted the line, but God dang, we was trying to make a living shooting ducks, and I've learned a lot in the past 20 some years, but had a lot of fun and learned a lot in the process of doing that too. Yep.
But to answer your question, I would say right around those years right there were, staggering number. But I did that photographed up there. I would say it really started to change in 09, around there. Like really started to get different up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned about when you was a young man, your daddy taking you up there, you hunted water.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going to Canada off and on, not near. I go several years between trips, but I can always remember going up there and we hunted fields pretty much. And a lot of landowners would ask you not to hunt the water, which to me, duck hunting they're waterfowl,
That's right. Yep.
That being said, they didn't want you to shoot the roost, go hunt other stuff. And nowadays, man, that's all anybody wants to do, go up there and take a spinner and lay out blinds or panel blinds. And I was up there a couple years ago, we put in the middle of the barley field. We was in the right spot. Heck, we shot them up, man. Put you 2-3 spinners out there and some decoys. Blow a duck call if you want to, but they coming.
Oh, it's effective.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not. Back in the 70s, early 80s, when I was still going with Dad up there, we would hunt geese in the morning in the field, and mallards and pintails would come into the goose decoys, but we didn't shoot them. No, Dad was like, no, we'll go shoot them in a water hole this afternoon, and I guess we liked, they're ducks. So like to us, it's a water thing, right? We like dogs and we like decoys and we like duck boats. And our whole heritage which is rich, like the richest of any sport there is. And I think is waterfowling and, water decoys and old wood ones. And it's always been around water for me. I just love it. I do. I love it. I'm not saying that I haven't had my fun in the field, in the prairie, but not like water for me.
I remember my first trip to Saskatchewan was very similar to yours. We was setting up a goose hunt, and that's back when they took them big 36-inch augers that you mount off a PTO on a truck. You dug down a spot in the field, and you fix it up in the middle of the night, and then you go back in and go to bed. But we didn't shoot ducks. That's the same deal. I said, no, we shoot ducks this afternoon. We're shooting geese this morning. And it was fantastic. It was unbelievable. And then you had to fix all them holes and fill all them holes up. And I'm like, man, this get old quick right here.
Yep. But like you said, that did, as time went on, that whole narrative, that switched. And it did become like, well, you're a roost buster. But I'll tell you something. Back in the day up there, when there was way more water, there was a lot of greenheads, and you really never saw that 20,000 to 80,000 stuff. You really didn't see it. What there was 100 potholes that had 500 on them. and you literally, you could go, there were areas that, I mean, I can't even describe what the water looked like, right? But you could go hunt them. You could go hunt traffic on just about any tiny body of water that there was, but that's gone. That stuff is gone. And then, then pressure on their food, and I'm going to use this, they kind of started to turn into, well, they have turned into kind of like a white goose kind of thing, right? A lot more like that, massive, massive flocks. Feeding habits are way different now than they used to be, right? I mean, I see greenheads up there because of pressure that won't even fly anymore. They'll literally walk out of a body of water into a place where they're going to feed and walk right back into the water. They're unhuntable.
Well,
that never happened.
A quick little side story to that is here a few weeks ago, we was hunting with Cason in a little tract of woods on his place, and this was funny. There's a single mounted drake flying around there. We just caught him at him. Sucker lit behind us through the woods. He hit the water, and I said, "My mom, he's back here to shoot him." He hit the water, swum towards dry ground. He hit dry ground, and he ball-lashed across that dry ground going down to the rice field, and we just sat there and laughed at him, and that's all pressure. So
that's pressure.
That's all pressure is what that is.
That's pressure. 100%. That's pressure.
As we come around here, I want to ask how you see things changing, or what do you see fixing it? But man, we've trained them. We've made them smarter. The smarter we get, all got to understand that Mother Nature's in a constant state of evolution. Natural selection wins. That's how they continue to survive. So as we come up with more flippers and flappers and whippers and whappers and swimmers and great duck calls and making decoys look like real ducks, and we're training people to be better at doing all these things to emulate ducks. Ducks have gotten better at figuring out what they're looking at, so they have just gone up the pole. So they're figuring out how to the ones that stay alive figure out how to stay alive, and that natural selection breeds smarter and smarter and smarter ducks. That's how evolution works.
100%, I agree. So how long ago? I mean, I don't know how long ago it was, but I'm sure at one time, white-tailed bucks weren't nocturnal.
I would say that's correct.
I would say, I know for a fact, because my dad used to tell me this, pheasants didn't run. Right?
Oh, heck.
They'd fly. Right?
They'd hold like would they hold, let me ask you this, would they hold like a Bob White?
Yes.
My daddy was a big time quail hunter. And, dogs go on point, cubby would hold, you'd flush and walk them up. So a pheasant was similar to that, I suppose?
Very much so. Like you could walk them up, right? Well, you know how they run now. I mean, they run, dude. It's bred into them. Now even rough grouse are doing it. Steve Grossman runs a lodge called the Little Moran in northern Minnesota. In my opinion, he's got more data, more knowledge of hunting rough grouse than any guy that's alive with dogs. And he tells me all the time, he goes, "Oh man, they're running more and more all the time." Right? But this never used to happen. It's pressure. Pressure is what does all this stuff. Like you guys were early in the show, we're talking about your duck season. Well, mine in the north was horseshit, right? But as the season went on and I went south, like I had some nice shoots in the timber in Missouri and in Arkansas. Jimbo, I stopped in. We had a cup of coffee, I believe, or a beer. And I went out and I had a blast doing that. And it was pretty and all. And I mean, but just how different things are compared to they used. I mean, I'm down there, and I mean, like the 3 clubs that I hunted, and I think you and I talked about them. Like they were all fun, right? In fact, one of them was an absolute banger, right? It's like crazy fun in the timber, and they're all like, yeah, but the ducks are all fucked up. And I'm like, what? And like, oh yeah, I mean, like they're all sitting on corn or they're feeding, they're nocturnal, they're doing this at night. like, you guys got the same problem we have. I mean,
Well,
they're different problems, but it's the same thing, you know.
look at Jake and them guys in western Nebraska this year.
Oh,
They don't have flooded corn, but they had the same nocturnal issue.
well, they did.
I heard about it all the time. Said, man, Jimbo, we got a pile of ducks on the river, but they're not coming to these sloughs.
I was there, Jimbo. If I did 3 days there,
I heard about it.
Oh my! It was like, and then you'd go in the evening. You'd be heading back to the lodge, and you'd see them coming off that river like you can't even imagine.
Oh, huge numbers. Huge numbers. Yeah, I've been out there and seen it. It's unbelievable, but it's different.
So what does that?
Pressure.
Well, so I agree with what all you guys are saying 100%. I see it happen every day here in Southwest Louisiana. And we're talking about pressure, but if you talk to the experts and you look at the numbers, they say license sales are going down and that we're losing our hunting population. So if the number of hunters are going down, where's the pressure coming from? Are we changing our hunting tactics?
Yes.
What's happening?
Yes. I think we're a lot better at killing.
So
we've talked.
Go ahead.
We talked about 99 kind of being the turning point. Jimbo, you and I caught the class of 99, along with that huge BPOP and everything else, those massive number of ducks. What else did we get in 1999?
The spinner.
There you go. Spinner. And that's not just Cass's version of one single thing.
No.
But suddenly, we got a whole generation of duck hunters that are duck hunters, not because their dad or grandfather went out and taught them how to do it, but because they went and got some D-cell batteries in the local Walmart, and they're a duck hunter.
100%.
And to your point, Doug, you're asking, license sales are down, but pressure's up. Well, in my part of the world, you've got less farmers that are actually holding water. So years ago in the 80s, people caught water because it was a thing you did. And they may have pumped it because fuel was cheap. That comes back to no-tilling now. Fuel's expensive, so they're no-tilling now. But anyway, we had more water, and you didn't always hunt it. Nowadays, if someone holds water, there's a gun in it. So there may be fewer people buying licenses, but there's less habitat. Add to that, we're all fans of express boats. I think all of us agree on that. But we're getting into places to hunt that we weren't ever meant to go, but we have access to it now. We've got our boats, we've got our spinners, and we're duck hunters. So we've upped our game.
100%. I think we're really, really effective at killing. Really good at it.
Along with that, when you talk about those license sales and federal duck stamp sales going down on a national platform, you look at states like Arkansas, our duck stamp sales are going up. Missouri duck stamp sales are pretty flat, but the high harvest states are going up. So people are coming to Louisiana, coming to Arkansas. There's a few more going to Missouri, maybe. West Tennessee, Mississippi, North Dakota. Of course, South Dakota's got the draw thing. Nebraska's getting a little bit more notoriety. Their ducks has always been in Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. They've always been in the Central Flyway. Just more people know about it now. We are a more affluent group. So even though our national numbers may be going down, those of us that do it, man, we're traveling and going and doing. I hunted, and I had to cancel 2 trips, but I hunted not only here at home. I hunted Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas this year, and I canceled Texas and Nebraska because of some outside influences due to COVID. So naturally, we do it a little different. But if I was just old Jimbo traveling duck hunter, I'd have hit a bunch of them places anyway, So how many folks are doing that very thing? How many guys do we know that get in a truck and say they're going to Kansas, or leave from your part of the world, hey, we're going to Arkansas, Missouri, or Kansas, or Oklahoma? When I was a kid growing up, if you knew somebody that went to Canada or went somewhere else duck hunting, they were famous. You wanted to wait till they got back so you could go look at their pictures they shot on their little Kodak 110 just to see what it looked like. Way more of that now. And we are becoming better and better at it. And we're adding pressure to ducks where ducks live. Minnesota used to sell more state duck stamps than anybody. Now they're because there was such a widespread distribution, people could go buy a duck stamp and go duck hunting and shoot them a few mallards on a pond or a little lake and have a good time doing it. You can't do that now, but those folks that still hunt, they travel. They'll go to the Dakotas. They'll go to Nebraska, Niobrara, or wherever. So we are getting better and doing a better job at it. A smaller number of hunters are educating a larger number of ducks.
So,
Lee, I want to get your opinion on the spinner, but I'm going to ask you at the same time another question. Here we are talking about, our pressure as individuals is increasing. We're going other places. We're hunting other states. How do you, Lee, feel? Do you think that's a cell phone thing, or we're in touch with the whole world now because of the internet? Is that how much of that's a social media thing?
Oh boy, I guess I never really. I don't know how to answer that. The social media thing it's an odd thing to me because first of all, I don't post shit about where I'm hunting ever. I don't know why anybody would do that, but I mean, I used to try to protect where I was because I knew what it was like. But I think I think that has it has a lot to do with it. Numbers, pressure, it does. I mean, what was it? It was a few years ago. I mean, I think less this year, certainly, well, because there was no Canada again, but you'd see a lot of that stuff. You'd see a lot of like lined up piles of young of the year birds, hens, greenheads that you can't tell are greenheads yet. And you'd see piles of those things from all across the Instagram, right? Do I think that has effect on people? Yeah. When you publish where you're at and what you're doing, and yeah, I'm telling you, I don't. The amount of people on the prairie in the north compared to when I was a kid is. It seems visually it seems like 100 to 1 to me. There's trucks and trailers everywhere. Back in the day, other than shooting, typically it was honkers. Back in the day, I mean, a lot of people didn't even like white geese back then, I think specks were always a favorite because people love to eat them, even locals. But it's a lot different. Narratives change throughout the years, Now you have cultures, and I don't want to just like I'm not saying just an age group, but cultures change, like what their idea or what their ideal of waterfowling is. It's just a lot different than when I was a kid. That's all I can say. The prairie is way different. It's way different. Not even close to what it was like. Still fun though. I'm not telling you I don't love it. I can't wait for next year. Right? But it's different.
Yeah, I think that's part of life though. Things change. Nothing ever stays the same.
No. Nope.
And that's something I think we got to learn to deal with a little bit as duck hunters.
Yep. For sure.
I was talking to Luke Naylor the other day. He and I hunted, and Luke Naylor's the waterfowl technical lead for Arkansas Game and Fish. He's a PhD, all around good dude. He gets it. Originally from Kansas, but a great student of the history of the sport, along with being a PhD biologist. And he kind of brought that up too. You go to a flyway meeting and he talks about what our contingency wants and what we're used to seeing to a guy in Indiana, and you talk about harvest birds per man, and we talk about, man, we're shooting only shooting 3 birds per man. I said, man, if we could see 2 birds per man here, we would love it. Y'all might need to get used to what you got. And
isn't that the truth?
There's probably something to that. We hear Arkansas, Louisiana, parts of Mississippi, West Tennessee, West Kentucky, Missouri, pretty spoiled, to when you think about it. Now, that being said, hey, I want to go back to what spoiled me. I'd like to see that again. However, we might want to realize that things do change, and maybe we have to change our standards. I'm not saying that's what we got to do, but
Right.
I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded, which leads me to a lot what's going on in the mid-continent, mid-latitude. Missouri. Everybody talks about Missouri. But when you look at their harvest numbers, and this year even their duck counts, nothing crazy, nothing over the top. But you talk about they held a lot of ducks for a while, but their harvest was way down. You hear a lot of people talking about flooded corn. You hear about that here at home, here in Arkansas. You hear about hot food crops. The whole deal. Do you see it in your mind? Do you see it turning back around? Do you see us being able to turn it around to see what you and I got to see as kids?
Not unless – go ahead. Yep.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you guys. Believe it or not, we've already just about burned up an hour. And as you can see, we have just scraped the surface of what we're planning on talking about. I think this next conversation is going to be a really, really interesting one. So let's I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. And if you guys are out there listening to this podcast, we're going to go ahead and create a part 2 of this one. And you most certainly want to stay tuned to our next episode when we do the follow-up to this next question. So all you people out there, again, that are listening, thank you for listening. And we hope you're gaining some information out of this. And as waterfowlers, we all need to stick together and hopefully we can continue to improve our sport. And thanks again to Express Boats for hosting this platform. And thanks to all our guests tonight. And again, we'll see you guys on part 2 of an interview with Lee Kjos. Talk to you guys later.